Have you heard of the Islamic dilemma? And I heard that and I was like, I
Yeah,
haven't heard of the Islamic dilemma. Hold on.
I can just see that there's something that is emotionally holding you back, and you're almost bitter toward God.
People in the modern world, if they lived in those times, would say that they could point to a couple things that they would say, well, that's not nice.
Yeah, I mean,
That's not
yeah,
nice.
he called the Pharisees a brood of vipers. John the Baptist did the same thing.
Yeah.
It's like this not that's not being nice.
Right. Well, I'm happy to have you on. I haven't had a guest in a minute. I haven't recorded with anybody in a minute. I don't think I've recorded one in like a month, and I've been reaching out to all sorts of people. I've had a Catholic guy, I think from Michigan, on my radar.
Mhm.
There's an Eastern Orthodox guy from New York, like I had mentioned. There's a Protestant guy that kind of debates on, with Islam and things like that. But what drew me to you was I seen you debating very calmly, might I add, with a Muslim, and I just really like the way that you put it. So you could go ahead and introduce yourself for the channel, and I welcome you.
Yeah, appreciate you, man. So my name is Kyriaun. I go by Kai normally. I'm an Eastern Orthodox catechumen, a Greek Orthodox catechumen. I used to be evangelical, non-denominational for a good while. I grew up in a Pentecostal church. The Pentecostal church definitely pushed me away from anything that was kind of high church or really, anything like that. I became one of those, all I need is the Bible. I just follow the Bible. I don't follow anything else. That's really like that kind of pigeonholes you in your practice of faith, because there's a lot of stuff in the faith that isn't explicitly written in the Bible. Like, what days are we supposed to fast? How are we supposed to fast? How many times a day are we supposed to pray? All these different things which aren't explicitly in the Bible, because the Bible itself is not, the only document we need for our faith. Like in Second Thessalonians 2:15, when St. Paul says to hold fast to the traditions orally and by letter. The letters are what we know as the New Testament, and then orally is, traditions and stuff. So yeah, I've been moving closer and closer to the Holy Orthodox faith, and I mean, I haven't looked back.
And that's a wonderful journey. One of the things I was talking with somebody not too long ago who was just one of the um, you'll have to pardon my accent. I say some things, I'm
Mhm.
really Southern.
Yeah,
So some things I say are going to come out really Southern, but it's the me and my Bible people.
yeah, yeah,
Me and my Bible
yep,
people, where it's like, I'm going to stay at the house. I'm going to exercise my faith on my own time and how I
yeah.
want to. And I was chatting with somebody not too long ago about that. And I said, what compels you to think that you can live out your own faith like individually? What causes this me mindset that you can just do it at home all alone, separate from anyone else? And they couldn't really work that out for me. And I said, like the perfect example of the lifestyle of an individual Christian is perfectly exemplified throughout the teachings of Christ. And I said, you know what the rest of the New Testament is, or most of the New Testament? It's about church. It's about church
Yeah.
and how the church operates. It's letters to churches all throughout the New Testament. Majority of the New Testament is actually not about me. It's about the church. So um, they were like, you know what? You refuted that really quickly. And I was like, I know. That's what I'm telling you. You need to look into this. And we definitely weren't meant to exercise our faith, all alone. I've known a couple people that have been pushed away by the Pentecostal faith to do exactly, kind of
Yeah.
go down the path that you were going down for a minute. Um, what would you say sparked your interest about the Eastern Orthodox Church?
What sparked my interest was first the historicity of it, and on how you can track the traditions and the practice and the doctrine and liturgy of the Orthodox Church, not only all the way back to the New Testament with Pentecost, but you can track it back to the Old Testament as well, because the nation of Israel in the Old Testament was a type of the church. That's why the Orthodox Church we say is the new Israel. So when you go back to the Old Testament and you see the liturgical worship and the sacrifice and um, the veneration of the images, like of the holy images, like David venerating the Ark of the Covenant. You see prayers and supplications made for those who have gone before us, like in the book of Second Maccabees, we see Judah Maccabee making supplications for his fallen soldiers, for edifying their souls. So we see all these things in the Old Testament, and where do we find all of these practices, and where have the traditions been held to the best? In the Orthodox Church. Now um, that's intellectually where I've found it, but honestly, when I first went to the Orthodox Church, I went to my local Greek Orthodox church just by myself. There wasn't anyone in there. The lady in the office, she let me in, and I just spent 2.5 hours just walking back and forth, kneeling, praying, looking at all the icons, and just I genuinely felt like I walked into like I feel like I was surrounded by the cloud of witnesses that we read about in Hebrews, and it was overwhelmingly. I felt at home. Like I felt like I'd been missing something for my entire life as calling myself a Christian, and like I had found it. It felt like the one puzzle piece that was missing was just in place now, and that's the best way I could describe it. Like
Yeah.
describing orthodoxy verbally is very hard, so that's why I just tell people, like, it's even in my TikTok bio, like I say, come and see, like go to your local Orthodox church and experience it. But that's the intellectual side, and the personal side of what I experienced when I actually went.
Right. Like how you come to it logically and then how you come to it,
Yeah,
like what your experience was with it that first time.
yeah,
And that sounds like a really bold experience. That sounds like like it felt like something different in a holy way
100%. Yeah,
from your experience. Um, so to dive into a couple, I sent you a couple of the topics. To dive into the first one,
yeah.
I think it's really important to talk about manhood. I think,
Mhm.
you said you were 20, you're 21, I'm
Yeah,
22. We're in that same age bracket, and men are struggling right now. Men don't know what they
yeah.
want. They're struggling to find answers to some of our, most grave issues in today's world. What do you think would be men's greatest struggles right now? Just a few.
Um, I mean, we kind of know the biggest one is I say the biggest one is lust, not just like sexually, but lust of the flesh. Period. Um, there's a great there's a Second Timothy, but I go Second Timothy 2:22. Uh, this is gonna have to be. I'm not reading the King James version. But flee also useful lust, but pursue righteousness, faith, love, peace with those who call on the Lord out of a pure heart. Um, yeah, the lust of the flesh is honestly one of the main things that young men struggle with nowadays. I mean, I'm on the track team here at Cal State Northridge, and obviously I interact with young men every day. Even the men who aren't on the team, or they're in a club, or I just kind of know them and I see them around or whatever. And what drives a lot of these young men is the pursuit of women, or the pursuit of sex, or whatever it may be, but it's all self-gratifying. And I used to be the same way. It wasn't necessarily with women. I've never been the kind to chase multiple women or anything like that. But again, I'm no better just because I don't have that specific struggle. Like I used to really struggle with I used to struggle with pornography. I used to struggle with money. Like if I didn't, because like right now I'm a college athlete. I'm on scholarship, and because
Yeah.
of like my schedule and stuff, I don't have a job. Right. So I used to really struggle with that, and I used to genuinely tie my worth to how much money I had and what I was able to buy and all that stuff. Almost kind of falling into that red pill mindset of like, if I'm not making money, then I'm not, I'm doing something wrong. So I think
Right.
I think the lust of the flesh in all different kinds of ways is the biggest thing that is really plaguing our young men right now. And I saw a really good video by Father Josiah over at Patristic Nectar, where he kind of echoed that sentiment that like our young men are struggling right now. And that's one of the many things, like the lust of the flesh, whether it's pride, whether it's sexual lust, whether it's the pursuit and the love of money above all things, or status, or insecurity too, because a lot of young men are just insecure. They don't have a sense of self, they don't have a sense of self-worth, and they try to plug that hole with all these different things, and it just doesn't work. So that's what I would say is, at least from my experience, and kind of just seeing what one of the biggest things that are plaguing our young men is, because young men are genuinely struggling, and we all need this. That's what we all need.
Right. Right. And you actually said everything on my list perfectly, which is a lot of what you find in that red pill, that manosphere or whatever they call it,
Yeah.
where it's pride, greed, lust. And if you search everything they're saying down to the bare bones of it, it's just centered around pride, greed, or lust.
Yeah.
It's all about, either the pursuit of women, money, or something to enhance oneself, something to elevate oneself.
Mhm.
And there's I feel like we're in a lost generation of men where they're looking for something, and that's the loudest answer that seems to be the
Yeah.
most prevalent. And they see that those men seem happy, seem fulfilled. They have everything that they want. They have all the money they want, all the women. So that seems like the fulfilling answer. But in turn, for long term happiness, it would be something more spiritually fulfilling. And we definitely need people our age, like we're doing in each of our own ways, to kind of be the people to stand up and say, this is the right way. This is the way that you ought to go for long term happiness, because everything else is ultimately a dead end.
Exactly.
Everything else it doesn't lead anywhere. It's
Mhm.
not actually leading you anywhere, because you'll always want more.
Yeah.
There's always some new bedroom fantasy, or there's a new amount of money to achieve, a new benchmark to hit with that. There's always a way to elevate yourself more and more and more in that individualistic mindset. So yeah, I definitely agree with everything you said, and I wish there was some sort of spiritual enlightenment of this manosphere that's really popular right now, and it's increasing in popularity by the day. Um, on the flip side of that, if you could single out three important qualities of being a good man, what do you feel like those would be?
Three important qualities. I would say servant leadership. I would say humility, and I would say strength, but not in the way that most people view like strength of just being super masculine. Um, we see Jesus embody these qualities in his life and in his ministry. The servant leadership, that's one of the biggest ones, especially for men who, you know, even not just for men who desire to get married, but just for men in general, being a servant leader, because it talks about in Philippians, like though Jesus being equal to God, he didn't think it robbery to be equal with God, but he emptied himself and became a bondservant. Like Jesus recognizing that he has been given authority over heaven and earth, he knelt down and washed his disciples' feet. So that servant leadership that Jesus embodied is very important for young men. And I struggle with it every day, right? The humility aspect of it, but that servant leadership is really important. The strength that I talk about is not just like it's not just a matter of physical strength and domineering or dominating or whatever, but strength in resilience and being firm in truth and being firm in what is right. Look, a perfect example. I'll use me as an example. Like in a few weeks or whatever, or I'll use a hypothetical. Like say um, me and my girlfriend, we go to to get married or whatever, and her parents like don't approve of orthodoxy, or they're like, oh, this is weird or this and that, because we're gonna have our wedding in the church. Like if they're like, oh, this is weird, I don't know, this is idolatry, this is I don't like this, you should probably move away from this, whatever. That's where I step in and I'm like, no, this is the path we're on, this is what we're doing, this is the truth, I could tell you why you cannot accept it, whatever. That's strength in that's strength, but that's not. I don't need to be domineering, I don't need to be nasty to be strong, but
Right.
yeah,
But still represent the boldness of the truth at the same time.
exactly. So I think embodying those qualities that Christ showed us in his ministry, and then we further see them embodied like in the book of Acts, with Peter and Paul's ministry, and then all throughout the history of the church, we see that we see that true masculinity that's embodied in Christ. So that's what's important, is the masculinity that Christ showed us, because the masculinity that the world shows us is that's actually toxic. Like being masculine,
Right.
being a man isn't toxic in itself, but the world has made popular and the world has showed that that's just not truly what a man is supposed to be. And like you said, it comes from pride, greed, lust, and just a place of insecurity where you have to feel like you need to bolster yourself.
Right. And I'll throw you a curveball here. I've mentioned this to a few of my guests that I don't actually think toxic masculinity is real. Like that's not a real thing because what is commonly labeled as toxic masculinity just isn't masculinity.
Yeah, yeah,
It's not
definitely.
something that would like like any of the traits that I view as masculine. It's kind of baked into the cake that you can't overdo
Mhm.
those things, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Like to serve people and have like a good balance in your life, to serve without self sacrifice
mhm.
constantly, like without sacrificing yourself to the extent that you're harming yourself, mentally, physically, spiritually. That's kind of baked into the cake. And any of the other qualities are the same way. Like you would be able to stand on the truth, but not in an arrogant way. That's
Yeah,
how truth would be represented in masculinity. So how could you toxically represent truth but not in an arrogant or harmful way? You
yeah,
can't. It's
yeah.
kind of like a contradiction to, the more traditional view of masculinity. I think a lot of times, like someone who's beaten down the character of all women, like they're speaking in monoliths, they're speaking about all women collectively, and they're speaking really harmful about all women. That's not toxic masculinity. There's already a word for that. That's misogyny.
Yeah.
That's something different because someone who's masculine wouldn't do that. They
Mhm.
wouldn't speak in a monolith and speak about all women collectively and make a statement like every woman is, um, let's just say, less book smart than every man or something of
Yeah,
that nature.
exactly.
Or like, just a statement like that. But yeah, most people don't understand that. Like, what do you mean toxic masculinity isn't real? Of course it is. Look at this. And I'm like, that's misogyny. And
Yeah,
then they're like, "Well, yeah, but it's also toxic masculinity." And I just don't see it that way.
yeah.
I don't see this kind of like this new form of like the red pill masculinity. I don't think it's masculinity. So
Mhm.
it doesn't actually fit under my umbrella of what that term means.
Yeah.
Um,
Before I really started to learn a lot more about Christ and about the faith and the history of the church and all that, I used to not I wouldn't say like I wasn't watching like Andrew Tate's videos for like I'm seeking something. I was literally just entertained at first, and he would say some things that I was like, I mean, this sounds. I'm like, I don't like how he's saying it. This is very. I mean, he's very clearly being performative, for views, because when he says like, oh, women shouldn't drive, like obviously no one actually believes that. But then as I researched it, did more like on them specifically, these are probably not the best men to be. Again,
right.
I wasn't like taking advice or anything. I just genuinely found some of their content entertaining, but honestly, not anymore. I'm just like,
I think everybody in our age bracket kind of
yeah, I'm
did at
like,
some point,
they
like
were
went through the
entertaining.
Tate phase. Right. And then kind of put it off like, no, I don't like Andrew Tate. I like Tristan, like
Yeah,
he's much more calmed down. He holds the same views, but he's much more calm about it. He's
yeah,
nicer about it. But yeah, their worldview is actually really crazy because when you get down to the bare bones of it, just like the rest of the red pill sphere, it's kind of like just lust, pride, greed.
yeah.
And
It
it's
probably
like
does.
what's left after that? There's nothing, there's not a whole lot of substance. They make a lot of descriptions about what things are. They don't make a lot of prescriptions.
Yeah,
They don't make a lot of prescriptions on how things ought to be, what you should do. They just make statements about what things are and what you could do. They don't really necessarily say what you should do. So you don't even get a solid worldview out of anything that they say. You kind of just get, do you want to be rich? Here's how to be rich. Do you want a lot of women? You could have a lot of women if you wanted to. They're not saying you should. They're just saying you could, and it's a lot of could statements. There
yeah,
is no should. So I don't even think they represent like a solid, consistent worldview. Like I never thought that Andrew spoke about anything really solidly based in Islam, and I never thought
never,
that.
never.
I believe that. What's his brother's name? Tristan.
Krista.
I believe that Tristan is he Catholic or is he or claims to be
Uh,
Catholic?
he claims to be um what's it called? He claims to be just Christian. I don't know if he claims to be Catholic or if he claims to be Christian or whatever he claims to be. But yeah, Andrew is the one
Yeah,
who is a Muslim.
right, right.
Yeah, but I wouldn't.
I
Yeah,
I can't see him kissing the ground for anyone.
yeah, yeah, 100% no. He's one of those. He's one of those people who is performatively Muslim, but like
Right.
not actually Muslim.
I feel like there's a lot of people like that. I feel like there's a lot of people in Islam like that, that
Yeah,
are,
definitely.
they're Muslim on a performative level. They're not necessarily practicing Muslims, which the same can be said about Christianity. But I noticed that it's a lot more commonly pointed out in Christianity, but not in other religions. Like, but people use loose labels like that everywhere across, Christianity, Islam. People use loose labels like that all the time, I feel like. To kind of move on to a larger scope, to talk kind of more macro, what do you think the world's three biggest current issues are?
The world's three biggest current issues. So I would say honestly everything political, like the political division that we see, we focus far more on like the right or the left or whatever rather than being centered in truth and tradition. So I would say the political division. Um, this is part of the political division, but it's still a crisis. Like something like abortion is an absolute crisis. We have tens of millions of babies being murdered every year, and it's just kind of a normal thing. Um, so let's say the political division, abortion, and the destruction of the nuclear family. Those three things are genuinely plaguing. I'll just say the United States, but the world really, but plaguing the United States because the further we move away from tradition, the worse things get. So, like moving
Yeah,
away from how the family is supposed to be is like it's just destructive. But those are the three things, and yeah, they all can be boiled down to like being a part of politics or whatever. But I do think that they're kind of separate. Not kind of separate, but like they can go together or they can be. Uh,
right.
you get what I'm trying to say.
They're issues in different ways, like they're defined separately. I think it's like, I think there was a stat that came out, and I think it's like 28% of our generation, like you and I,
Mm.
28% of people that would be in our age group, in our age bracket, have been aborted.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
think it's like huge numbers,
Yeah, it's
huge
like a third.
numbers.
It's like a third, almost a third of Gen Z has been aborted. Like a third of my
Yeah,
generation is gone before they even had a chance to, see the light of day, just because of how
right,
normalized it is. Like you talk to, I made a video the other day, or I posted on the school story. They do not like me on my school story, but I mean, it is what it is. I posted something that was like, I've never like, there's no good argument for abortion. Like the only routes you can go down are you dehumanize the baby to the point where it's like just popping a pimple, or you what is it? You either dehumanize the baby, or what was the other point that I made? You make it about like some women's rights thing. Like, oh, I think the woman should have the right to her body. It's like it's not her body.
right,
But and then I've oh my goodness, it's so I feel bad for the people because I don't like the people themselves aren't like evil, but like this agenda to kill babies and massacre babies is evil. Like it's no different than
yeah,
what we see happening in the Old Testament with the Israelites sacrificing babies to Baal. Like it's no different. So I've had a few conversations where I'm like, it's not the woman's body that like the child has its own DNA and its own body, and then they'll like go down the route of the child being like a parasite or a tumor that is attached to the woman's body, and I'm like I can't see how y'all see babies as like parasites or tumors, and then
right,
at that point we kind of just have to leave it there because I'm like that's a moral barrier that I don't think we're gonna break because I view babies as a gift of God and I view everyone as image bearers of God. If you view a baby as a parasite, then I mean that you're gonna get rid of that parasite if that's what you view a baby as. But I can't.
right.
we
I
can't
think a
really
lot of the
fight.
young women are just persuaded, to think that. I don't think they're like they have evil motives necessarily. I think a good portion of them might, but I think a lot of times, maybe not most of the time, but a lot of times you'll just find someone that's been persuaded to think that they're not actually doing something harmful.
Yeah.
Um, but it's such a twisted mindset that people hold that argue for it, um, and even to step away to try to get to try to step into their arena and to step back from the spiritual and just to talk like scientifically or biologically,
Hmm.
they still will deny, they'll deny outright facts. Like, when does
Yeah.
human development begin? When is the moment that a human life begins technically?
Hmm.
It's at conception.
Yeah.
But
Very, very
they'll
clearly.
avoid that. They'll beat around the bush. They'll move away from that. They'll kind of pivot, move the goalpost. Um, and then somehow they'll, swing back around. Well, that's your definition of the science because you're religious. And
Hmm.
it's like,
Yeah.
no, that's my definition of science because that's science's definition. Like, that's when
Yeah.
it says, like, tech. You can look at any textbook. Like, people just don't seem to understand it, and I don't think that people really know. I think two things that would change a lot of people's mindset is to watch an abortion.
Yes.
And I'm not necessarily recommending that everybody actually do that. I just think it would change a lot of people's viewpoints to watch one and to see the numbers in which it had been done.
Yeah.
And in that
Totally.
order, you have to see what's actually being done and then look at the numbers of how many times what you just watched has been done.
Yeah.
And I
It'll
think
really
that would,
change your outlook.
yeah, I think that would shift a lot of people's mindset. Have you ever debated about that on TikTok?
Yeah, yeah. I have a few different prompts that I'll go live with. One of them is like abortion is murder, and then obviously I have the some different Christian prompts that I go live with. But when I've went live a few times with the abortion prompt, and the argument that I always get is like, what do you define as a human life? And I'm just like, well, the life begins at conception. But then they'll try to argue, well, it's not a human being because it's not outside of the womb. And I'm like, I don't care about your special terminology that you've made in your mind. I always just say, what species is the baby? They'll say it's a human. I'm like, okay, so it deserves human rights. And they're like, no. And I'm just like, well, okay.
Why?
Well, yeah, I'll be like, why? Because it's not a human being. And I'm like, okay, we're just going in circles. Like, you're denying the very
Right.
premise that will break your argument, but you're just simply denying the truth. So, like, I don't go back and forth too much, especially because when you're debating about a topic, it's very clear when like say if someone's on the affirmative or someone's on the negative, like abortion's murder. I'm on the affirmative, someone else is on the negative. When it comes to a point where one side has to admit that their argument is wrong or they have to concede a point. And even conceding a point doesn't mean you automatically are wrong, but it takes humility to be like, okay, yeah, I concede on that point. If the other party is not willing to concede on even one point when it's very clearly obvious, then I'm just like, we're done. Like, I'll pray for you,
Right.
but we're done with this conversation.
And I think a lot of people know where it leads to. Like, if I can see this, I know where it's going next. And
Yeah,
I know, like,
yeah,
I'll eventually, I'll have to go down the logical and just the most scientific route that this goes down.
hmm,
And that leads to one conclusion. And I'm not wrong because
yeah,
women suffer, or, whatever the catchphrase is at the time. Um, I've I won't say that I've spoke to anybody that's told me this, but I've heard from different people in the medical field, that all of the exceptions, like for life of the mother and things like that,
yeah,
another solution is delivery. Like, the solution, whether it's
yeah,
like life of the baby, life of the mother, like I've heard situations like that don't really exist. So,
yeah.
like,
No,
for the
no,
majority of the
that's
time.
definitely true. That's definitely true. The overwhelming majority of abortions are not I'll just say the RI or life of the mother. Like, it's not those. Those are like 3 to 5% of abortions. But you can see, and honestly, you could try this. If anyone brings that up, I will concede that to them and say, like, they'll say, oh, what about this? And I'll be like, okay, well, that's 3% of abortions. Are you willing to get rid of the other 97% that are elective? They'll say no. It's like you don't actually care about those victims. You're just using them to support your own cause. Like you're using the
Right.
minority to justify the majority. If we were to get rid of all elective abortions that are not those three cases that are 3 to 5%, then we're saving millions of babies every year. And like I still think that's a win. Now, obviously, I am on the side. Now, there's people that are on the whatever spectrum. I believe abortion should be abolished entirely because I don't think any baby should be murdered. But if we're going to get rid of 90%, 95 to 97% of the babies being murdered, I still think that's a win
Yeah.
compared to
That's a step in the right
yeah, it's a
direction
step in
for
the right
sure.
direction compared to the 70 plus million that are murdered every year. It's like, okay, we're knocking that number down by like 65 million. Like, that's great. That's better than nothing. But
Yeah.
you'll find a lot of times the people that argue that they're not even willing to make that concession. They
They
just
won't
want to
concede the one point.
exactly.
They'll use that as the exception to mandate the general rule,
Yeah.
and then if you grant that to them, like, okay, I'll grant to you that we will, we'll keep it in terms of, RI, or what was the third case,
Life of
life
the
of the
mother.
mother.
Yeah.
If we grant to you that we'll keep those three and abolish the other, majority,
Hmm.
is that okay? Well, no, that's not okay. Well, why?
Yeah,
Why
yeah,
not?
exactly. And it's like,
It's
yeah. I
just don't spit out talking points then.
mhm,
If you won't be intellectually honest
mhm,
and,
exactly.
concede the one and grant me the other. If I'm granting you one, and it's just basically like it's like you're taking a step forward to meet them halfway,
Mhm.
and they won't take the other step to meet you halfway. So there's no
Yeah.
there's no way to ever find common ground. It's really hard to find common ground with, people who are just intellectually broken in that way.
Yeah.
Um, I think it all falls kind of back on where you base your morality too. Like, so we have the Bible, we have scripture, and church authority, and the non-believer, whether atheist or agnostic, just doesn't have a very strong moral grounding. Like, it's just, I believe they call it moral relativism,
More
where
relative.
it's
Yeah.
just what it's kind of just whatever, whatever the collective decides, or whatever seems to do the least amount of harm. But it could change tomorrow. Like, the standard, it's not an unchanging standard. I think that's what makes it so tricky. And that there could be 10 new rules they come up with tomorrow that are completely contradictory to what the standpoint is today.
Yeah.
And so if it's always shifting and changing, it's just so hard to argue with people like that. Um, you said you're not very popular on your campus as far as your
Not
standpoints,
not at all,
and
man.
you said you were from California.
Yeah, super super liberal university. Even even when it comes to because if you couldn't, I'm black. If you couldn't tell, it was a surprise to me too when I got up and looked in the mirror this morning. But um, on campus, obviously we have clubs like the BSU. We have a place called the Black House, which is like a Black resource center and stuff. But even going into those spaces, I don't know if this is just like I don't think this is just with black people. Like it can be anybody, but specifically in black culture, we idolize our race so much, and like it's genuinely. I'm not gonna say. I don't, when I say sickening, I don't mean like in a way of like the people are sick. I'm talking about the ideology of just we idolize and
Right.
exalt our race above everything. Like we have a BCM, a Black Campus Ministries Bible study, and the last one that I went to, we spent 45 minutes before we got into the scriptures basically talking about our race and culture. Like we had a question that to anybody else and to me sounds absolutely bonkers. It was like how do you view God as a black person? And I was like, what does that have to do with anything? I'm like,
Right.
but then there
Like
was
the same way that anybody else would view God, I would assume, it's
exactly.
not that deep.
Yeah, I'm like, but what we try to do, we weave the race politics in with scripture and in with our relationship with God, and that's also it's so harmful. But even things like I've been vocal that like I'm not a fan of Black History Month. I'm not a fan of like all the talk of reparations. I'm not a fan of Africana studies because the professors don't actually know what they're talking about. Like I talked to an Africana studies professor about it wasn't even we weren't about Jesus on the time. We were just talking about like the history of everything. And like he made a claim. He was like, every single problem in the black community is caused by slavery. And I was like, that's a broad claim. He couldn't substantiate it. He was just kind of going back and forth. And you know, what they like to do is they like to appeal to again our skin color. And he's like, man, me and you, we look the same. We come from the same place. And I'm like, dude, that does. I'm like that doesn't matter. I'm literally like, prove your claim. And then we got to Jesus, and he said to me, you worshiping a God who doesn't look like you is self hatred. Like he said that was self hate, and I'm just like,
That's always been so crazy to me. Like I was talking to a guy one time. I sort of dabbled in Christian rap for a little bit,
yeah,
and I was chatting with this guy, and I was like, "What do you think about all the conversation?" Like, I want to say at the time it was really popular. People were talking about, Jesus was a black man, Jesus was a man of color,
yeah,
and all this stuff. And he was like, and he was a black guy that I was speaking to from Texas, and he was like, I don't think that matters. Why does that matter?
mhm,
I don't see, whether or not he looked like you or looked like me or he was somewhere in between, that doesn't really justify anything. Like
yeah.
that's not a means of who he came for. Have you heard of like the Hebrew Israelites?
Yes, I've had extensive conversations with Hebrew Israelites, and they love talking to me because again, they're the Hebrew Israelites are racist. Not all of them, but the ideology is racist. So they love appealing to race. Like they'll tell like for example, they would treat me and you very different. Like they would tell you they either wouldn't talk to you or they would just tell you that you're damned to hell, or they would tell you like you could be subservient to them and maybe get some kind of crumbs or whatever.
That's
But
actually crazy.
exactly to me, they would try to appeal to my race and be like, you know, you a brother just like us. You from the tribe of Judah. You can be saved. All this and that. And but they don't believe Jesus is God. They don't truly believe in the scriptures. They don't believe that salvation is for everyone. So I don't I kind of know where the Hebrew Israelite like originated, but like their theology and their ideology is so broken and indefensible that when you actually sit because the Hebrew Israelite thing is they go out in public, they're screaming, they're I don't know if you've seen the videos where they're like when they read the scripture, they're like first Pete. Actually, they stay away
And
from
then they all kind of like
yeah
almost like a cult, like they repeat
yeah
it.
like yeah they do that. But when you sit them down in the debate setting where they have to go back and forth, like when Captain Tesseract when he debated Sam Shimon, bro,
I think I've seen him
yeah,
before.
like he had to go back and forth with Sam, and he had to really sit down and dive into these verses, and he very clearly lost. Like not even just the debate, because you can lose a debate and still be right, but this man he couldn't contend or answer a single point. He had to concede on multiple points. He still came away thinking that he's right. So the Black Hebrew Israelite ideology is just they're a racist cult. Unfortunately, that's what they are. It's a race religion, just like rabbinic.
It's crazy. It's crazy how much race gets like intertwined into different religions, different branches of religion and things like that. I heard not too long ago, the Mormons. Have you heard like about some of their ideology, how they view black skin and brown skin as like some sort of
Yeah,
curse, and it's like
it's like the
crazy.
mark of
It's
Cain.
like
Yeah, that's what they believe.
crazy, like
Yeah,
crazy racist ideology. And
mhm.
it's like it's kind of like similar to the Hebrew Israelite way of thinking, only on the
Yeah,
flip
it's on the
side.
other
So
side
it's
around. Yeah,
like and it's like the craziest part I think is my objection with both of them. That's not even my strongest objection to either. Obviously, I
right.
object to racism, but like, hey, both of you, Jesus is God, and like, here's the correct way.
Yeah,
Here's
exactly.
how
Neither
you
of them
ought to
believe Jesus
believe.
is God. So
Right. It
like,
just so happens that
yeah,
the cults like that, or the the groups that believe a certain way. It just so happens that every time I've noticed that race happens to be intertwined with the ideology or the faith, they that they deny the divinity of Christ. And
mhm.
that's so common. Like that's
Yeah.
increasingly common.
I mean,
Like
it's honestly like that in pretty much every major world religion that people don't actually know about. Like the quote unquote Abrahamic religions. I'm not going to call them Abrahamic. They don't worship the God of Abraham, but like Islam is the same way. With like, if you're not Arab, then you're not. you're not as valuable as an Arab Muslim. If you're a Christian, you're the worst of all creatures. But if we're talking specifically race, like I'm not 100%, like obviously I've, read different things, and Muslim scholars and Muslims in general will tell you different things. Like they will 100% lie to you. So you have to be very cautious about who you get information from, because they'll straight up lie to you to,
Yeah.
and that's something they're allowed to do to promote the faith. But if you're not Arab, you're not of the same value as an Arab Muslim. Like if I were to convert to Islam, I'm not like I'm like a second tier citizen. I'm like a second tier Muslim. The same thing with
That's so odd.
like rabbinical Judaism. If you're not a Jew, then they don't believe. They're like the Hebrew Israelites with how they believe, except if you're not a Jew.
Right.
Black Hebrew
It's
Israelites,
all about the bloodline.
yeah, they just believe that Black, Hispanics, and Native Americans are the Israelites. That's what they believe. So if you're not that, then you can't be saved. But the rabbinic Jews are just like, this covenant is for us and us alone. So if you are not one of us, then you can't get in. Which that's never how, like literally in the Old Testament, even we see the type of the church, again, the nation of Israel. We see all throughout the Old Testament that the Gentiles will be saved. The Gentiles will be grafted in. Yeah, we see that fulfilled in the church, where when you become a member of the church, then you're a part of the new Israel. Like you are a spiritual Israelite. But those who are not a part of the church are the Gentiles. So
Right.
ironically, the rabbinic Jews are part of the Gentiles because they're not a part of the new Israel, a part of the church. But yeah, whether it be
Right.
Mormonism, Black Hebrew Israelites, Islam, Rabbinic Judaism, Talmudic Judaism, there's always a race component, and there's always denying the divinity of Christ. Like it's a race component, and Arianism always is present in these pseudo religions.
Yeah. I did want to ask you, what's the main belief or worldview you think comes up the most often when people come up on your lives to object to what you're saying, the message you're spreading?
Uh, it's twofold. There's either, well, I'll say threefold. There's one, the non-denominational, the church doesn't matter. I don't agree with Orthodox practices. Some of them want to actually explain, and others want to debate. The most of the ones that want to debate, they don't actually know their church history, because if they did, they wouldn't be non-denominational. Because once you learn about the church history and you read the book of Acts, you're like, this is not non-denominational. You read and you're like, where's the liturgy? Where's the worship? Where's the Eucharist? Why are we, the Eucharist, the communion, the crackers and grape juice are in the corner. Go get it after service. Where's the reverence? All that stuff.
Well,
So
Paul used Welch's, right?
yeah, oh yeah, 100%, man. But
Sorry.
yeah, it'll either be that crowd or someone who actually wants to learn. But the second is someone that like just doesn't believe in Christianity at all. Which, I mean, I'm not gonna say it's annoying, but it's like I have the prompt up there to talk about orthodoxy, and then someone will come in there like that's a Unitarian or an atheist and be like, convince me that God is real. And I'm just like, dude, even if he were to show up in your room right now, you still wouldn't believe. So, and you can kind of tell by like the disposition and heart posture that you don't actually want to be convinced. You just want, like, I had people come in and say, I'm recording this, and you look really bad right now. And I'm like, if that's your goal, to come in and get a clip, then like you can leave. And then the third thing is
Right.
is a lot of,
Like, treat me like a person. This is a
yeah,
conversation.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
it's so digitalized these days.
yeah. The third thing is I'll get a lot of Muslims that come in, and they'll disguise themselves. Like I start asking now, because I can tell now. They'll be like, "So you believe Jesus is God?" And I'm like, "Are you a Muslim?" And they're like, they'll hesitate, and they'll be like, "Yeah." And I'm just like, as soon as I find that out, it's like, no, we're gonna pivot, and we're going to focus on your book, because your book says my book is right. So you have to figure that dilemma out. That's always what I bring up, because like I don't want to hear what you have to say on my book, because if you try to disprove my book, you disprove your book, and your book is disproved by my book. So
That was your argument actively whenever I came up on your
yeah,
live. It was, have you heard of the Islamic dilemma? And I heard that and I was like, I
yeah,
haven't heard of the Islamic dilemma. Hold on. I didn't know that's what you were referring to. I have
mhm,
heard of that before,
yeah,
but you caught my ear with the Islamic dilemma and I was like, okay, let's go. What's this
yeah.
about? And they don't seem to have very good answers to that.
No, it's the answers that you'll see with the Islamic dilemma is the Bible is corrupted, and it's like okay, the Quran doesn't say that, so your Allah is telling us to refer to a corrupted scripture, so he's incompetent. And they'll be like, no, well, then they kind of have to scramble and this and that and be like, well, we had it, but it was corrupted. And I'm like, okay, so when was it corrupted? Because Muhammad himself was given the Torah. He couldn't read it, but he was given the Torah at like he was alive. And we know that the scriptures are preserved because we have church fathers like St. John Damascene from that time who have the same exact scriptures that we have today. So like, what are we talking about? Because we can go back. What they don't realize about our church is it's 2,000 years old. We can go back to the
Yeah,
700s or the 600s,
it's
and
all on paper.
like we can see the scriptures. We can see the beliefs of the church fathers and the theology reflected in the writings. So yeah, the two main arguments are, well, the text was corrupted, or it was there, but it got again corrupted. And I always ask, like, okay, where is the Injil? Like, if we don't have it, where is it? They're like, I don't know. You just don't have it. And I'm like, okay, well, Allah doesn't know how to do it. Your Allah doesn't know how to do his job. Then it's that simple.
Right.
He told me to
He
judge
couldn't
by,
preserve that.
yeah. I'm like, he can't preserve his divine revelation. I'm like, it almost sounds like it's not his revelation. It almost sounds like it's from the
Right.
one true God, and your Allah is not the one true God. But getting into
What is
that.
their do you know what their connection is to like Baal? I seen it
Mhm.
was some Islamic country where they burned a statue of Baal and I didn't understand the
Yeah.
connection. I know Baal from the Old Testament, but
Uh-huh.
I didn't know what their connection to Baal was.
So it was the Islamic Republic in Iran. They were burning that statue of Baal because that's who they believe Israelis worship, and Americans too. Like they were burning it while saying death to Israel and death to America and all that stuff. Like that's what that was for. Like um it was a show of political like resistance or that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, I honestly believe, and we can see that because the Allah that they worship is not the God of the Bible. He's not the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob,
Yeah.
100%. So then we can speculate on who actually is this God that they worship. Um, I mean, I think Baal is a decent enough contender. I mean, I would say the same thing for the rabbinic Jews, because it's some kind of fallen angel, some kind of demon. Because in the book of First John, we read that if you like anyone who denies the Son is the precursor to the Antichrist, and you can't have the Father without having the Son. Like if you deny the Son, you can't have the Father. So they deny the Son, but they claim to worship the one true God, who they claim like they claim that the Father is the one true God. One, Allah
Right.
is not a father in any sense. It says in the Quran that He has no son. And two, you again in the scripture that the Quran verifies, you can't know the Father without knowing the Son. So
Right.
it's it's
How would
a
it
dead
be a
end.
father in that case?
Yeah, it's a dead end. And thankfully, Islam is on the downpour. Now, obviously, I've heard people say, "What's the fastest growing religion?" This and that, and it's like the way that y'all spread Islam, the actual Muslims spread Islam, because you're a TikTok Muslim. Like you don't know your Quran. You're just on here yapping.
Right.
The way that the real Muslims spread Islam is nothing to be proud of. I'm like, they spread Islam by the
Isn't it
sword.
mostly isn't it mostly through birth rate too though?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
most of it like they use that talking point like it's the fastest growing religion, but like yeah, through birth rate. Like most of it's through birth rate. And I mean, it's a tough thing to say, but a lot of it's inbreeding. I mean,
Yeah,
I hate to say it, but you
yeah.
can look at the stats,
It's a lot
like
of it's inbreeding, non-consensual, and these men are allowed to
yeah,
have up to four wives to have as many kids as possible to spread Islam. So it's like
right.
it's not a good thing that, well, oh yeah, Islam is the fastest growing religion, and it's like that doesn't make it true. That just means it like it's yeah it's a virus. I agree. I genuinely agree that like the growth of Islam is telling, but it's not in a good way.
I thought it was crazy. I told you I listened to a little bit of Andrew Wilson, and he debated a Muslim,
Mhm.
and he was talking about that was like his core argument. They said the prompt was Christianity or Islam, which one is better for society,
Oh
and
yeah,
he was reading off the various statistics and things of that nature, talking about anywhere that Islam spreads to, or Muslims migrate to, like hardcore Muslims, the inbreeding rates go up and stuff like that. And I thought that was the craziest thing. You never hear about that. And I started digging into the stats, and like the lowest percentage I could find for an Islamic country was like 24% inbreeding rate.
Like
And I
24%
was
of the
like,
population is inbred.
yes, like the lowest percentage I could find. I think the highest was maybe Pakistan at 65%. And it just blew my mind. I was like, that's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah, that's insane.
And the dilemma they run into there is Muhammad married his cousin.
Yeah,
Were you aware of that?
yeah.
So
One of the many
they
ones he
can't,
married. Yeah,
right. And they can't condemn it. Um, I was going to ask you real quick as well. What are the weakest arguments you found coming from Muslims against Christianity? But first, I wanted to talk about Aisha's age. That
yeah,
the whole issue there. Um, a common counter I hear from Muslims to Christians is, and this is just one of the weakest arguments that I know of,
yeah,
is they name several people in the Bible who
mhm,
married particularly young women.
yeah,
But I think the weakness in that argument is we don't say that those people were flawless or sinless in
yeah,
any way, shape, or form. We don't claim that any of them were, in some way chosen by God to be sinless or perfect in any way.
yeah,
And their claim is that Muhammad, who married as young as they did, was sinless. So they have a completely different claim than we do. And they try to use that as a talking point, but we don't stand for those men doing that in the way that they do Muhammad. So I think that's something that they run into a lot, but they don't even realize it.
yeah. The weakest, one of the weakest. All the arguments are pretty weak, but one of the weakest arguments that I always hear is it's centering around Muhammad, and it's like, oh well, Rebecca was three. Like it's such a baseless argument because just surrounding the context, not only is she called a young woman multiple times, and I mean, none of us would call a 3 year old a young woman. Like that's a girl, a baby, like it's a child. But not only is she called a young woman multiple times, when we're introduced to her, she's carrying buckets of water to water 10,
Right.
I'm pretty sure it's camels. Like she's watering 10 of them. So it's like either she was the very first baby power lifter, bodybuilder, or maybe she was a young woman that was old enough and strong enough to actually do this physical labor. Because it's like, oh, so you think a 3 year old was carrying buckets of water to water these, like this, does that make any sense? What are we talking about? So it's just a talking point that sounds quote unquote bad on the surface, but it's just a lie. It's just a lie that
Right.
they're like, oh well, Rebecca was three, and it's like even if I grant you that, like I think it's Lot's. I think no, that's not Lot's wife. Who is it? Whose wife was that? Was it
It's
Jacob?
not Jacob,
It
was
was
it?
Jacob. Yeah. So it's like even if I grant you that, Jacob isn't a prophet. Jacob isn't.
Jacob wasn't sinless.
Yeah, but
Was Muhammad sinless?
Yeah,
And then,
Jacob wasn't sinless. Like we don't follow Jacob. We follow Jesus.
right.
And like you follow Muhammad, and Muhammad married a 6 year old and consummated when she was 9, and it's literally written in Sahih al Bukhari. I'm like, why is
Yeah.
this written down? It's one of the things
Consummated
where
the
it's like,
marriage when she was 9.
it's like
Yeah.
why is this written down? And it's also written down like uh, they say, oh well, Aisha has her own hadith, so she couldn't have been young, and it's like it's very clear that she had someone writing for her, or it was at a later date because after the
Yeah.
prophet, she was 18 by the time the prophet died, because they consummated when she was 9, and then he was. It says in the hadith that he was with her for 9 or 8 years. Was it 8 years? I think it was 9 years. 9 years until he died. So she was an adult by the time he died. So it's very plausible that she's writing this stuff down either after or someone's writing it for her. But
Right.
the Rebecca was three is the most baseless argument I've ever heard against Christianity. That
And like you,
whenever it
go
comes up,
ahead.
I just shut it down immediately.
Yeah. It's like you can so easily grant that and then say Jacob was, by human nature sinful.
Yeah,
Will you grant that for Muhammad? No, you won't.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Let's move on to a different argument then, because that one is very, it just falls flat on its face.
Yeah.
Um, have you ever spoke to an atheist?
Yes, yes, I have. There's
I assumed that you had. My brother used to debate, and he ran up on a lot of atheists, and they're tough, man. Like they're
yeah,
really, you can just tell, like they're very hardened in their thought process. They're, you can't really see the content of a man's heart, but it seems the outward fruits seem very telling
yeah.
that they speak from a very hardened place in their soul, and it's just so like. What's your experience with that?
My experience with that is it's always a very personal and emotional thing. Like someone will come into my live and oh, there's this guy. He joins every live. He doesn't request up all the time, but he'll join and watch for a little bit. It's like angry Reddit atheist is his thing, and I mean he lives up to that name for sure. But he came in the live, and what they'll do is they'll argue for the basis. Like I like to keep them at the existence of God, like who created the universe. Is it more plausible that the universe was created or the universe just happened? Like the universe has a very clear fine-tuning issue, so how do you reconcile that? And I like to keep them there because just like how I like to keep Muslims with the Quran, or I like to, like, I'll keep a Jew with the Old Testament and the messianic prophecies. I like to keep them on a point because they love to jump around. So I keep them on the creation argument because the universe was created, it's not eternal. They'll try to say, "Oh, the universe is eternal." It's like, no, it's not. Like scientifically, the universe is expanding. It can't be expanding if it's just always existed. There was a point when it was not, and now there's a point where it is. What happened? How did that happen? So there's not a good argument at all. Like I was talking to this one guy who claimed to be atheist, and he said his argument was there can be a being who is omnipotent and omnipresent, but not omniscient. And that makes them not God, but they still created the universe. So his argument was a being that is somehow omnipresent and somehow omnipotent, that is not omniscient, and that he that being could create the universe and not make that being God, but the universe still came into creation. And
So
I
he still fell back onto some sort of deity
yeah, we just
of sorts.
stuck to that point because I'm like, how can that being be omnipresent and omnipotent and not omniscient? How does that even work? How can a being be omnipresent and not know everything? And he was just like, I don't know, that could happen. And I was just like, no, it can't. So like I really stick to those points of creation because an atheist will have a very tough time reconciling how the universe can be created. And they love to sometimes appeal to like the mystery that, like, they say that we appeal to that mystery, but it's not true. Like we appeal to mystery in the way that we can't fully know our infinite God, but they appeal to mystery in just being ignorant. Like, okay, how was the universe created? What makes the most sense? I don't know. Because when you really think about it, you come to the conclusion of God. So you
Yeah,
you can't think about it, and it's like you said, they're tough. It's a sad case a lot of the time because I can just tell, like, emotionally something is holding you back. Like, I don't know if
it's
you've been
almost
church.
like a bitter place.
Yeah, it's like I don't know if you've been church hurt. I don't know what's happened. Like you said, I can't see your inner heart. I don't know your heart posture. I don't know, your intention of what you're going through. But I can just see that there's something that is emotionally holding you back, and you're almost bitter toward God, right? And it's like I've been there. I've definitely been there of being bitter toward God, of being mad at God for something. But I thank Him for His grace that He's never left me. But I say the same thing to the atheists. I'm like, you don't acknowledge Him, but He wakes you up every morning. I'm like, if God doesn't wake you up tomorrow morning, you don't wake up. Like you just die. Like, but obviously they'd be like, oh well, that makes God cruel, and your God is a dictator. And this, I'm like,
Right.
no, I'm explaining to you how graceful He is because you blaspheme Him every day, and you deny His existence, and you harm His image bearers every single day, including yourself, and He still wakes you up every day. So I just try to plant the seed of being kind to them, but also pointing out the stupidity in their arguments because,
Right.
like, we have to. Uh, this came up yesterday because God bless his soul. There was a younger kid who came into the live. I was talking to a Muslim, going back and forth, This Muslim in particular is a blasphemer. He blasphemes the name of God. He blasphemes the Father. He blasphemes Jesus. He blasphemes the Holy Spirit. He blasphemes the Theotokos. He literally just it's like he's just spamming his ult and he's just blaspheming everything all the time. Like
Yeah.
as soon as I come into the live, he's like he starts cussing me out and this and that and blah blah blah. So I always go to like, well, your prophet was a PDF. He was a PDF file. Like, this and that. Like, how do you reconcile with that? And no, they always hate that. You can't say anything bad about the
Yeah.
prophet. So we're going back and forth on that. And I end up kicking him because he's just talking too crazy for a TikTok live. Like we can't have this language
Right.
on TikTok live. And God bless his soul. This young kid comes up. He's an Orthodox choir. He comes up and he's like, guys, we have to be nice. We have to pray for our enemies, this and that. And he's just saying to be nice. And I'm like, dude, I understand what you're saying and where you're coming from, but I'm like, that's like what you're saying. It's not being nice. It's being weak. Like we're not supposed to be
Right.
nice. We're supposed to be kind. I'm like when Jesus comes,
Sometimes you can say something kind that's not nice, and sometimes you can say
exactly.
something nice that's not kind. It's,
Yeah,
what's needed to be said, the truth. Go ahead and say what you
yeah,
were going
no,
to say.
no,
I didn't mean to
no.
cut you off.
No, exactly. It's exactly what you're saying. Like he was just trying to say like, oh, just be nice and pray for him and pray for your enemies. He was just kind of saying those words back and forth, which again, it's fine. He didn't really know what he was saying or the meaning of what he was saying or the layers. I also used to think that we just need to be nice, like just need to be nice to people, and it's like those who make themselves enemies of God need to be dealt with, like not in a hateful way, but like, okay, you're gonna blaspheme God, you're gonna blaspheme Jesus, and you're gonna blaspheme the Theotokos. Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to expose to you who you really worship, and now you're going to deal with that. Like that's something that you
Yeah.
personally need to deal with. Like Muhammad is this, and he's that, and your God, who you call God, is this, and that. Go ahead and reconcile with that, and tell me how that is the one true God. And then there's no answer, so there's just curse words and all this different stuff being thrown out.
Yeah.
And
Got to give
again,
them the hard truth.
yeah. Again, it's not. And he was like, don't talk bad about his prophet and this and that. And I'm just like, I literally have to. And I'm not down talking him. I'm just telling the truth about him. It sounds bad because this is who he is. Like if
Right.
somebody honestly tells somebody about you and you get offended, that's not a good sign. Like they're just telling the truth about you.
Yeah. Well, and do you realize how many people out of, what is it, like 8 billion people in the world? Do you realize how many people it would be not nice to say Jesus is the only way, the only truth, the
Yeah,
life? He's the only way to heaven. Do you know how many people that wouldn't be nice to say to? That
yeah,
wouldn't be nice to say to an atheist, but it'd be kind that they know the truth.
yeah,
It
exactly.
wouldn't be nice to say to, Buddhist, Hindu, Muslim, Jew, anybody that's outside of our worldview. It wouldn't be nice to any of them.
Yeah,
It wouldn't
exactly.
be nice to a very sizable portion of the world, but if it's the truth, then it would be the kindest thing that I could possibly say to them would be the truth. And it's crazy. It's crazy that, nice and kind are completely different. And there are things that Jesus did while Christ was on the earth. He did things that were kind,
Yeah,
but people in the modern world, if they had lived in those times, would say that they could point to a couple things that they would say, well, that's not nice.
yeah. I mean,
That's not
yeah, he
nice.
called the Pharisees a brood of vipers. John the Baptist did the same thing. It's like
Yeah.
it's like that's not being nice. That's simply being truthful. Like that's what they
Was
are.
it Peter? He said, "Get behind me, Satan."
Yeah, it's like that's not.
And
Oh,
it's
that's
like
not
that's not
nice.
nice, but he's saying that for a purpose. There's a purpose behind that, and the
Yeah,
purposes and the intention is kind.
yeah,
And the
exactly.
meaning of what he's saying is kind, but it's not nice. It's not supposed to be nice. Um, the core message of Christianity isn't, depending on who hears it, it's not a nice thing to hear. It's just not.
Yeah,
There is one way that's correct. All other ways are incorrect. And I love you enough to tell you that. And it doesn't sound nice, but it's kind of me to tell you that. That's the truth. And I don't want you to perish, or, I want you to be on the right path. So it would be most kind for me to tell you that. Um, to kind of to pivot just a little bit on more of you personally, um What have been your personal top three greatest struggles?
Personal top three greatest struggles.
And this can
Lot,
be before or after your Christian walk, either one or both.
yeah, so I'll say lust and self image. Lust, self image, and pride are the three biggest things that have really held me back in the past, and even sometimes still do creep up. The lust of the flesh, the pride, and just the self image, the self denial, and those kind of things. I I don't struggle so much with them anymore, and that's simply a product of holy orthodoxy and being a part of Christ Church. Really, that's the one true church. That's really what I can like attribute all of this to. Like I don't struggle so much with it. But those are the three things that have genuinely like I look back on my life and a lot of the pitfalls and struggles that I would fall into was revolving around those three things. And the self-denial and insecurity portion too, it goes back to what we were talking about with the whole toxic masculinity. Again, it's not toxic masculinity, it's just misogyny or whatever. Like that goes back to insecurity. Like I don't feel good about myself. I don't, feel valuable or feel valued. So I need to do something or be something in order to compensate for that. And that's led me down a lot of rabbit holes. It's led to a lot of negative stuff. But those are the three things that are the have been or had been the biggest struggles. Right now, I would say, you know, I don't I don't know if I could pinpoint one thing. I mean, honestly, I think patience is the biggest thing right now, and because like I naturally like move really fast with things, so and like I have like the facts for so like if I want to show somebody that the Orthodox Church is the one true church, I'm like I have these very convincing facts here that you can go back and verify for yourself, but like they'll not act on it or they'll just kind of ignore me or whatever this and that, and I'm just like being patient and knowing that not everybody is going to move at the same pace of like not everybody's going to move at the same pace. That doesn't mean they love Jesus any less. That doesn't mean they're any less faithful. Just not everyone's going to move at that same pace. So, really slowing down and being patient with people, with myself, and just, with everything is, that's right now the biggest thing that I'm kind of working on, especially, Great Lent starts today. So, the patience and slowing down is the biggest thing that I need to work on right now. But those three things in the past, mostly before I came to Christ, but even after I came to Christ, those were they ramped up. After
Yeah,
like after I was baptized, they kicked it into high gear to say the least.
yeah, for sure. Well, I got two more main questions. First, I wanted to ask you. This is a question I'm going to ask everybody, all guests that come on, because this is my common theme on here. Is
Mhm.
what moment in your life truly forged you into the man that you are today?
Uh, if I were to pick one, if I were to pick one, I would say the death of my grandma. I think that's one where it was such a surreal feeling that it was a surreal feeling, but it kind of put me in a place where I I wouldn't say like a hyper independence, but when my grandma died, it was just a very strange feeling that can't describe. Like I was sad, I was devastated, but I was almost relieved because I knew how she was living. I knew that she was sick and that her situation wasn't the best. So I was almost relieved that she was like relieved of the suffering that she was going through, and that I hope and pray that she's on to a better place. But that kind of I'm not gonna say it like radicalized me or anything, but it genuinely kind of made me realize that tomorrow isn't promised, and to really value life more. And it didn't really kick in until a little while, but I keep going back to that event and how I felt because it was such a strange feeling that I'd never felt before. Like I've had friends die, I've had other family members die, even friends like die young and stuff, and I've never felt how I felt when my grandma died. It was a feeling that I can't really describe, but it was like a somber realization of reality that comes up often now with like whenever I have to deal with a situation. Like the other day, I was just driving like normal, and my car turns off, like my starter turns off, and I'm like 20 minutes away from my apartment. It's been it was an interesting situation. I hadn't it had been like 6 hours since I had ate, so I was like starving. I was tired. My phone was about to die, and I was just kind of sitting there, and I had that same feeling of just like I'm like this is life. Like this is what I have to do, and that's what really has forged me as a man. Because sometimes you just have to like this is what you have to do. So I'd say
Right.
that is the moment that I look back on that has really it's really forged my resilience mentally, spiritually, and even physically to just keep going, and not give up.
Right. Yeah, I can definitely see a moment like that really setting a fire under you and, kind of bringing you into that wave of shock where you come to that realization. I can relate to that. I have a few different events like that. I had heart surgery when I was 9, and then I had brain surgery again when I was 11, and constantly hearing about the risks. It was a heart blockage and then a brain aneurysm, and it's several. I feel like different events for everybody that kind of bring them to that same realization that every single moment has a meaning,
Yeah.
and you can sit back and wait and kind of just float through life, or you can search for the meaning, be active, and seek the fullness of the truth in your faith, um, and really seek out more meaning in what you can do with each moment that you're given, because we
Yeah.
are we are really given the time that we have. We're not just here and taking up time simultaneously, but we're given this time, and it's really important that we use it wisely. We seek those things. The last thing that I just wanted to give you the opportunity to do is just to give a final message to everybody. Whatever you feel most led to say, you can tell them about your mission, or I'm going to link below where they can find you,
Mhm.
um, and things like that. What's one thing you would want everybody to know that comes across this video?
Yeah. So Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through Him. He is the narrow door in which we enter into eternal life. When Jesus became incarnate, He took on our human nature. He became everything that we are, along with His divine nature. And His human nature, our human nature, was perfectly deified. So our path to salvation is theosis, is union with God and union with Christ, to take part in the divine nature and in his energy, not his essence becoming God, but in his energies and being deified. So the most important thing that I've learned is our salvation. And our salvation is found inside of his church, the church is the way in which he saves us, the method he uses to save us. That church now we know, as a lot of people know, as the Eastern Orthodox Church. We just call it the Orthodox Church because it's just the Orthodox Church. It's been the same since Pentecost. But that is, that would be my message to everyone: is that Jesus is the only way to heaven, and the way in which he chooses to save his people is through his church, and that church is the Orthodox Church, the what we most people know as the Eastern Orthodox Church, and that's, I think, the most important thing um, that I could tell anybody, because this life will pass away, and everything in this life will pass away, but His word will not. Neither will He, and neither will our souls. Like we will have an eternity after this life, and how we spend that eternity, we want to spend that eternity enjoying God's presence. So we have to live that way now to enjoy that eternity.
Absolutely. Well, man, it's truly been a pleasure to meet you and have you on. You're all the way across the United States, but it's such a blessing to be able to meet people that are so faithful, in my age bracket, so faithful, and want to spread this message to other people. I will tell you that sometime I may try to join up and give you some support on the live or something of that nature. I think it'd be really cool to come and hang out and just hear some of that firsthand, and chat with some of these people if you'd want to do that sometime. And you are truly welcome back at any time.